Good afternoon. Welcome, everyone. This is the Marion City Council work session for Tuesday, October 4th, 2016. We begin with a presentation by Lisa Winke, the Director of Marion Cares. Hello, welcome. I invited Lisa to come and share with us a little bit about what her organization is doing. I think they're really doing a great job in meeting some real needs in our community. And when you hear about the needs that are there and what that they're meeting, it's pretty amazing. And I think we should all know about this and be more informed. And she and her organization have been able to really make some progress recently. And they had an event on Friday, and I want to thank Mayor Pro Tem Spinks for attending and representing the council. I wasn't able to make it, but maybe we'll hear about that tonight. So, yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. First of all, for those of you that know me, it's going to be very difficult for me to stand still and not use my hands and not let my face go away from the microphone. So I'll do my best so you can hear me. I'm going to give you the quick and dirty version about what Marion Cares is and what we do and why we do it. This is just an example of a statistic from one elementary school in Marion. It has 536 students, and almost 40% of those qualify for free and reduced meals. So that means approximately 214 students at that school are living at or near poverty level. That's one school in Marion. And if you think about, that's one elementary. If you think about middle schools, high schools, all of the other elementaries, you can see that this is a significant need in Marion. So what does Marion Cares have to do with this? We are a faith-based organization, and we provide services, meals for at-risk students in Marion. And these are our two awesome program coordinators. I cannot say enough about them. I wish that they could have been here today, but they're both teachers at Novaka Elementary, Rachel Morris and Carrie Larson. And they're really the ones that make it happen. It's kind of my mission to raise awareness about poverty and the types of needs that we have in the community. And then these girls are actually in the trenches, doing the work, working with the kids, and they are absolutely amazing. So if you ever have an interest in volunteering or helping out, they'll be the ones to talk to. Here's what we do, and here's some pictures of our kids. We have text time once a week, which is a Bible study for students, homework help a couple times a week, STEM classes, which is science, technology, engineering, and math. We provide the kids with snacks and hot meals because we discovered right quickly that they weren't eating at night. We take them on field trips. We've had art and music classes, and we do physical recreation and fitness. And I'm going to show you some really cool pictures of some of the things we did this summer. And I will tell you some of the things that Rachel did that are amazing with these kids. So this is the fun part. We went to the Eastern Iowa Arts Academy. I don't know if you know much about it, but it's in Cedar Rapids, and they provide programming for students that might not otherwise be able to experience art and music classes. They have professional musicians and artists, and we got to go one day and paint. And there's me. Learn how to play the drums, ukuleles. It was a really, really fun time. And if you ever have an opportunity to go down and check that out, it's awesome. It's kind of down by the Tic Tac in Cedar Rapids. The kids had a great time. They got to go to AirFX, the trampoline park. That was kind of something that not very many of our kids have ever had the opportunity to do. And that was a little crazy, not going to lie. But they had a great time, and everybody made it home safely. They've got to go over to Marion Christian Church, to Vacation Bible School, and meet some people there and make connections with some of the people in our community. And you'll see Peter Mitchell there. He's the head pastor at Marion Christian. Library. Ooh, Marion Library has awesome things going on. Thank you very much. They went to Zumba. They saw animals. They did all kinds of fun things when they went to the library programming that I can't say enough about what the library has to offer for these kids. It was really fun. more wild animals, not just the kids, but real ones. Oh, the Marion Independent School District has a volunteer day in May. It's called One Day in May. And they contacted me about what they could do. The high school students, they have a day off of school, and they go and they volunteer for organizations in the community. So we had about 18 high school students from Marion Independent come over to our facilities, and you can see kind of the before and after. You can see some high school girls sorting our books. I mean, it was amazing what they did. They completely reorganized our storage, and it was a good time. They were done in a morning. It's something we couldn't have done in 3 weeks, but it was a really great experience. And it was another way that Marion Cares has an influence in the community by providing opportunities for high school students to volunteer, and adults. Build a backpack. This is a big deal. We provided almost 300 backpacks to kids in Marion that needed them. So they were able to head off to school. There's Rachel. Head off to school with backpacks filled with all the school supplies they needed. And that was a really fun event. It was a lot of work, but it was a fun event. We also were able to provide some food from HACAP that day. So the kids and their families, when they came to get their backpacks, were able to take some food with them as well. Oh, look who's there. And I'm going to tell you that's James Riley from Fairway. He's the manager there, and he and his wife do a lot of work for us at Marion Cares, and they provide a lot of food for us. They're amazing. This is awesome. I'm particularly proud of this. This just happened last Friday. I became a partner, Marion Cares, I shouldn't say Marion Cares became a partner with HACAP because it was a great way and a great resource for us to get food for our kids. Well, I found out that Alliant Energy had donated this mobile food pantry. You might have seen it in the news. And I said, well, wait a minute. we have areas in Marion, and they're desperate for food. Why can't you come to Marion? So I got a call from Greg Goodell. I don't think he's in this picture. And he said, I would love to come to Marion. So we had our first ever visit from the HACAP mobile food pantry to one of our neighborhoods on Friday afternoon, and it was awesome. We were able to serve 52 households, 180 individuals, 3,994 pounds of food, and all of the things taken together would make up 2,578 meals. That's a lot of food to a lot of people in 1 hour. So it was great. It was fun. It is very well run. So they're going to be coming back to Marion. I think they're going to do it in this neighborhood once a month, and then we're going to kind of spread out into some of the other Marion neighborhoods. This is why we do it, right there, because when our kids are eating, when our kids have positive adult contact in our community, when they have a place to go after school, this is what they do. And you can see Rachel working. They're doing a STEM project there. And then they had a space thing. I think those are space goggles. But they're doing stuff at least 3 days a week. And then they're also doing additional things. Like she took them to this Lane County Fair over the summer. And she said, Lisa, I don't know. I'm scared. I'm like, it's going to be okay. So when she got back, she said it was amazing. And she said she only had enough in her budget for 2 carnival rides per kid. And she said, I could not believe, she said, I kind of thought we'd get complaints. And she said they were so gracious, and they had so much fun, and there was not a single complaint. And they got to see animals and do all kinds of fun stuff there. So that was really cool. And the other thing I wanted to mention, too, was Rachel was able to work with the Linmar Aquatics director. So we had 7 of our kids that were able to take swimming lessons for the first time that had never even been in a swimming pool. It's really, really awesome. So I'm very excited about what we're doing. We're doing all kinds of different things, but I'm hoping that you will be willing to support however you can, get involved, or at a minimum spread the word, because we need lots of hands and lots of adults. And I really want people to know what's going on in Marion and how many needs we have here. Thank you.
Could you mention real quickly about where you actually provide the after-school services and meals for the kids? I mean, you actually have certain places where you're located that...
We do. We have 3 apartments in the Azure apartment complex on the corner of 10th and Boyson. They give us 3 apartments there for programming, and I think we pay for maybe one or two. It's a discounted rate. So that's really that's kind of our main facility. And then we provide programming in Marion Village in the community room, and then out at Squaw Creek Village in their community room, the management in those places, very supportive. So kids can just come to the community room after school, and we do our programming there. They have a little kitchen there, so we're able to feed them and do our programming in those three areas. And one of our major goals is to move into the Marion Independent District too. So I've been talking with the superintendent and one of the principals, and we're looking at maybe doing some service there in the school after school. So we're working on that too, trying to spread our services throughout Marion. Need more bodies, but we're working on it.
Any questions for Lisa?
No, thank you very much for what you do for our community. I have witnessed that through several different organizations and functions and participated as well too. So kudos to you and your group.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. That was
Thank you.
The smiles and the thank yous were worth it.
Yeah.
I also found some muscles I didn't know I had unloading the truck.
Yeah, you did. You were hauling those food boxes. It was a really, if you ever get an opportunity to do any volunteering with that mobile food pantry, it's slick. I mean, it is really nicely run, and it's a great experience for everybody involved. So
Yeah.
if you ever have a chance to do that.
I was going to ask, Greg, you mentioned doing it again.
Mm-hmm.
When the weather gets bad, I just wondered, Ryan, if the big umbrella building, he had mentioned about some place to have it out of the weather. They could pull the truck up inside there and have the people come in, and so they're not standing outside in the cold. So I thought I would put that bug in the air to see if we could arrange that when the weather gets bad.
That would be great. We did kind of talk about that, and the manager, Lori, the manager at Marion Village, said we can also use the community room if we would need to do that, and there's tables, and we could set up in there too. I mean, it'd be little logistics change, but I think that would work as well, because it's gonna be challenging when it gets colder.
Right. This way, you could just have the whole truck in there, and it'd be almost like we did
here.
Yeah. So
That would be great.
well, thank you.
Thank you very much.
So, thank you again for everything. And I just wanted to just make a comment. I mean, I think a lot of people, I wanted you to come and talk to us because I think a lot of people, sometimes we just don't think a lot about these issues, and that these really basic needs do exist in the community, and we're so grateful that you're out there meeting those needs and providing the food assistance and support services to these kids and their families. And, so I just wanted everybody to know about it so that they can help out in any way they can. So
Yeah, thank you very much. Me too.
Yeah.
I talk about it
I mean,
a
it's
lot.
important to us that our community is healthy and taken care of. And
Yeah.
so thank you.
Thank you.
We have another presentation this afternoon by Trees Forever. Shannon Ramsey and Dustin Heinrichs are here. So welcome. Thank you for coming.
Yeah, thanks everyone for having us over here this afternoon. We'll try to be relatively brief in our comments, but my name is Dustin Hendricks, and I'm a local field coordinator for Trees Forever. And those of you who aren't aware of Trees Forever or where we're located, we're actually directly above the Bank of the West, right on 7th Avenue. Been here in Marion for quite a while. Locally homegrown nonprofit organization, been around since 1989. We have our founding president here with us today, Shannon Ramsey, as well as our development director in back there, Kaisha Boyson. Just to support me and Shannon here. I primarily wanted to talk just briefly about some of the amazing things going on here in the city of Marion, some partnerships we've had in recent years, in particular since I've been on staff here with Trees Forever, just to remind you folks of some of the things we've done together and some of the things we hope to continue doing together moving forward here. Primarily, we've partnered, especially in the last 5-6 years here, through the Align Energy Branching Out program. We've been able to plant a number of trees especially along the streets and park corridors here within the city of Marion. We've partnered a lot with a couple volunteer programs. The Tree Keeper program, which is a volunteer program where we train volunteers to help us maintain and plant trees around the community of Marion, in Cedar Rapids a bit, Hiawatha to a degree. I think there's actually a tree keeper in our crowd. I'm going to call out Kesha Billings from your city staff. But that's been a tremendous partnership. City of Marion's loaned us a lot of space to put on those classes at the various parks in the area, as well as trees to practice on. Because when people are first learning how to take care of trees, they obviously make a few mistakes and need some practice trees. And so we do work on the younger trees and gather up their skills to the ability level where they're able to actually really help support city staff and park staff to be able to keep those trees looking nice and healthy for years to come. So I thank you for that support as well. Probably the most recent and exciting project we've had here in the city of Marion is up at Lau Park, the orchard, the community fruit orchard that we put up there. We also put in some nice educational permanent signage so that visitors to the park don't just see a small grove of trees, they actually see that it's an educational installation and a laboratory that's there for years to come. So I'm very much looking forward to working on that with you guys as well moving forward, particularly with the Parks Department. The final thing I wanted to do was just commend you guys on your preparation efforts for looming community forestry threats. Currently we're dealing with the emerald ash borer beetle, have been for about a decade now here in this part of the country. But I have to say, just on a personal level, as I've been out working with a number of communities for the past 5-6 years now on this issue, the city of Marion is really better prepared than 99% of those communities, and I commend you for putting the resources in the right place to get to this point. So we're here to support you in any way, shape, or form as you continue to kind of figure out how you're going to address that issue, as well as many future community forestry issues. Next, I think Shannon Ramsey is actually going to come up and talk a little bit specifically about the Our Woodland Legacy Symposium, and I'm going to distribute some materials to you folks.
Justin, just show folks that.
Sure.
Great to be here, and it's also good to hear that Marion Cares presentation. Anyway, just to mention quickly, having tree-lined neighborhoods is very important to the health of families, and we've got a lot of research to show that now. Some recent research in Sacramento really points to that. And since Marion recently is coming off the Blue Zone certification, I think you guys know how important getting everyone outdoors is, and you've really focused on that. We want to thank you guys for your past support of the Our Woodland Legacy Symposium that's coming up December 8th. You've been very involved. Tom Treehorn has been on the steering committee, very engaged. And it's been great having Marion as a significant sponsor, and we want to thank you guys for that, and just for all the time and effort you put into helping with it. We'd like to ask you guys this year to support it at a $10,000 level, and join forces there with Cedar Rapids, who's in at that level. It's become a real learning community for the whole area. People do drive in from other spots. We've had people come from as far as Chicago. Mainly it's kind of regional, Lynn, Johnson in the area. But, I think Marion leads on a number of things, including the Biophilic Community Project, the stormwater fees for urban forestry. I mean, those are very innovative. So we really appreciate you guys being in the middle of it, and we'd like to suggest that you get right in their level with Cedar Rapids. So that's our request today. Any questions on the symposium? Or we handed out an agenda for you guys to see. We have Marion tied in a number of ways. Mayor, we'd love to have you there just to say a few words at noon, if you can make that date. Any other questions or thoughts on that? We feel it has had a huge impact. We know it's had a huge impact on the community. We'll be celebrating 10 years at this event, and trying to collect stories and thoughts from people as to the impact it has had. But, we hear comments about this has really changed my thinking. It's had a huge impact on the way I do work. We have a tremendous number of city staff from both Marion, Cedar Rapids that attend, along with our elected officials, and quite a few members of the media. So with that, we look forward to working with you guys on this year's symposium, and hope you'll consider that. Thank you. Questions?
I would just add that Councilman Brandt is also on the steering committee, taking my spot on there, because I wasn't able to participate on the committee. But and we're really proud that you guys are headquartered in Marion, and really proud of the work you do on a national level. And we will support you however we're able to. So,
Well, Marion's on the move, so we're happy to be part of it. Thank you.
There's
we have one more
I wanted
question
to,
here.
There's one thing I wanted to mention. The engineering department puts out a weekly newsletter. I just wonder if that'd be an avenue for you guys to, could they add comments into your newsletter, Dan? So Dan's department heads it up, so that's something that goes out by email every week.
That'd be great, Dan.
So-
And we can tailor a message, just any way you want to work it from the standpoint of something that is more on the engineering. Well, Tom, you could probably help with that, but it'd be great.
Yeah, thank you. That'd be
Thanks,
great.
Joe. Great suggestion.
Any other questions?
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Shannon. Thank you, Dustin. We have one more presentation this afternoon. We have Lynn County Supervisor Brent Olson with us to talk about minimum wage. Welcome.
Thank you. Not much of a presentation as much as I wanted to make myself available for any questions you might have, and if you don't have them tonight, that's fine. That I wanted you to know that both myself and the Civil Division of the Civil Attorney's Division of the County Attorney's Office are available to you to answer any questions about the ordinance that was recently passed for the minimum wage in Lynn County. I wanted to say that I know you've read about it. I know you have the ordinance now, have received that and reviewed it. There are a number of exceptions in there, and what I'm encouraging the communities to do is to either adopt a mirror version of the counties for this first year, or do nothing and let it go into effect in your community for a year, and see what the legislature does. And that is one of the biggest motivators we had. We knew this was available to local communities to do. It hasn't been done in 10 years by the state legislature. I think we all know from our experience that the legislature is becoming a little bit more like national politics or governance, where a lot of things aren't getting done and people can't sit down and reach agreement. So we've done this to in part, spur a conversation, because I do agree it should probably, or it can be best done at a statewide level. But since it hasn't been done and hasn't been brought up for a vote, we commissioned a study. We took a commission study that showed 18,800 minimum wage workers would benefit in Lynn County if it were to rise. So we proposed a 3-year, $1 per year ordinance. And in talking with Cedar Rapids and Hiawatha, and I know Councilman Etzel and Mayor Abu-Asali both attended a few of those meetings where they began to study it, and the mayor of Cedar Rapids is committed at least to the first year, and then we can see what the legislature does, and the county and the cities involved can go back next year, and we could potentially change our ordinance if we get some guidance from the state. But I think it's an important issue. It's one important for Marion. Most 95% of these people who earn the minimum wage live in either Marion, Cedar Rapids, or Hiawatha. So we think it's important that in a time where we give out tax increment financing for developers, which I think is a good thing, when we give tax incentives out to those who create jobs and do development, when we have that kind of environment to create jobs, we think it's also important that we address those who are on the bottom ladder, and that they get a fair shake, and that they get an opportunity to move up as well. If you have any questions, be happy to answer
Questions?
Brent, I have just a couple that I'd like to lead into for general discussion, but what is the recourse of these individuals that would possibly come out of the qualifying lines, if you will, for state, local, county aids as far as low-income subsidy? Do we have any numbers, any statistics as to, you say that's 95% of these folks live in Marion, Cedar Rapids, and Hiawatha, but do we understand the great impact that generates on a normal salary, an extra dollar an hour, will that impact any of these people? Will it disqualify any of those people in the first round of levels of a dollar increase?
Well, like with any salary increase, things are based on federal poverty line, state poverty lines. Those programs in May, I don't have any studies that show exactly once we implement $1 an hour, so $80 every pay period, what that might do to somebody who's on public assistance. But I think it probably would be a wrong assumption to assume everyone that makes minimum wage is on public assistance. So we'd have to look to see what percentage of those people who are on minimum wage have some public assistance and what particular program it might affect.
Yeah.
You have a question?
Question I have is, have the supervisors, have you heard any feeling on the pulse of Reisner and what might happen at the state level in the next session?
Well, as you know, last year, Governor Branstad signaled that he'd be willing to sign a minimum wage increase. Did not specify what that might be, but that he would at least receive it and review it, I guess, favorably. I think it was a signal to do something. The Iowa Senate did pass a minimum wage increase. I believe it was to, don't quote me, it was somewhere in the $8 range. The House did not take that up. That's been for a number of years where they've passed it either out of committee or out of one chamber, and then the other chamber doesn't take it up. And a lot of groups that have lobbied me to not do anything or to only do a certain amount were groups that failed to register on the bill in prior years in the legislature, or the groups that came to me and said this really should be done at a statewide level. Some local business groups and others failed to register on that bill when it was in the legislature last year or the previous years. So something had to be done. We think that we've taken a reasoned approach. There are a number of exceptions in there. I met with a lady that ran a Curves, and she was very concerned that she wouldn't be able to keep her employees that currently do make minimum wage there. And when I sat down with her and looked at her revenues, they were under $300,000 a year. She found out she's exempted. There are a number of exceptions in there for daycares and some certain nonprofits. So those are things we can go over with you to address some concerns that people might have in lower revenue type businesses.
We as a city could go to the $8 and not move on to the other until we know what the state is doing.
That's what I'm encouraging every community to do, is to at least take the first step. And the first step would either involve you doing nothing and letting it go into effect, or passing your own ordinance that mirrors ours, but that doesn't have a year 2 or year 3. So that's an option. What I don't want to see, though, is I'd be back next year if the legislature didn't do anything. I don't want to see Cedar Rapids, Hiawatha, and Marion break up and have different wages. You'd have a Hy-Vee in Marion that pays different than a Hy-Vee in Cedar Rapids, potentially. I'm just using that as an example. They probably don't pay minimum wage, but if they did, you can see the problems.
We would have, I think, beyond that, there's a lot of jobs that have different pay grades, pay grade 1, pay grade 2, pay grade 3. With such a deal like this, it would force the business to change their pay grades, because potentially you could have now a new entry-level position making more than a pay grade 1 or pay grade 2. So it does impact a lot of these businesses to reevaluate what their pay grades are. The city as well too, as far as a lot of the...
Yeah, I've asked that question, though, of a lot of, you mentioned the city, and I've asked that question of a lot of different entities, and most of them don't peg their wages to minimum wage. But I have heard some comments that, like seasonal employees, and things like that. Those grades might have to be moved up based on our minimum wage increase. But I still think that's a good thing for the community. It's going to affect the county too. We have seasonal employees in both conservation and a number of other programs where we'll probably have to raise those grades. But we just think that we need to pay attention to the entry level and the bottom of the ladder just as much as we do the top.
Other questions? Yeah. Kim?
I would just like to thank the Lynn County Board of Supervisors for taking up this issue, and I think that you've done it reasonably, a reasonable approach, and it needs to be done, especially tonight after we hear from Marion Cares how 40% of one elementary school is qualifying for free lunch. That number is probably just going to keep going up, so I think we need to address it.
Yeah, I appreciate that, and I did try to take a reasoned approach. I moved to take out the automatic escalator they had in this ordinance because it felt like it should be addressed from both objective and subjective views. You should be able to look at the local economy in 3 years. So as a supervisor, we have this ordinance. It's going up $1 a year for 3 years, unless we do something about it next year or the year after. But you need to be able to look at your local economic situations at that time. And I've always not liked formulas because they work 90% of the time, but then that 10%, they lead to an absurd result. And so I think it's incumbent on us to look at every fact before we do that each year.
So you are going to look at it every year?
Yeah,
Okay.
I plan on it.
Because that was my big question is what if the state or the federal government does not do anything for 5 years?
If the state doesn't do anything next year, I would lean in favor of going ahead with what we've done. I can't imagine that they wouldn't do anything next year after the Prairie Fire. You have this 99 patchwork quilt of counties, and a number of counties have passed different minimum wages now. And if it's true that business groups and others think that it's and like myself that thinks it's probably done better at a statewide level, they will address it. This is no different than when counties started doing KEG ordinances or we had the smoking bans. You start to see all these different rules for different communities. They had to deal with it then, and I think that we've created the atmosphere for them having to deal with it.
Well, so much of it, I think of my former life, we never had anybody other than me working for minimum wage, but we have an office at Monona. I'm thinking of my former operation. And if we did have somebody at a minimum wage here who works 1 day a week in Monona, it really makes it difficult, So you have a lot of businesses that have operations in Marion, and then they may have an operation in our suburb to the west down there. And so 2 years from now, are they going to make, it's going to be very difficult for business. I think it's a supply and demand thing. I think the people are worth the money, the businesses are worth to pay more money.
Right, and that would be true, so we wouldn't need a minimum wage. We would let the market just totally decide what somebody's worth, but they have passed a minimum wage, so there is one, and we have to decide then, now that we have one, whether that's something that needs to be changed periodically. And, I would say that there are companies that will have other branches in South Dakota or Nebraska or Minnesota or Illinois or Missouri, and they all have higher minimum wages than Iowa, so they're already dealing with that.
Yeah, I believe it's a state issue, but I will be in favor of us probably going to the $8. I probably won't be in favor of moving forward and giving the state an opportunity. That's how I feel anyway.
Yeah.
Giving the state an opportunity is, I think, if you're in that camp.
Right. And if they don't, I'll be back in
June. Then we'll have to do something different,
right. I appreciate your time and your consideration. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Brent.
Okay, moving on to finance.
Yeah, Your Honor and council members, number 4 and 5, we have starred in finance. Thursday, we will have the public hearing on the budget amendment for the current year. And then we hopefully will follow that up with an approval of the budget amendment resolution. There should be a memo in your council packet that Leanne Carey and my department put together that pretty well summarizes the reasons that we are proposing this budget amendment. Normally we do this in the spring, but the way our new software is kind of set up, it kind of drives us to do something before then, because now whenever we exceed a budget line item, finance has to go in and manually do an override to get that expenditure processed and paid. So if we can pass an amendment, budget amendment here in the fall, we probably will have to come back again in the spring and do another one to kind of clean things up. But as you can go down this list, you can see an awful lot of things that we've identified that need to be pulled into the current year budget. That budget was adopted last March, and these are just a lot of things that transpired since then. The first line item, a lot of carryovers that we had that were approved in June. Various projects were in various statuses of completion, and we didn't always spend the money in the right year, so we're kind of having to pull a lot of those into this year. And you can just go down the list. We've acquired several properties relating to the Uptown area and Tower Terrace area. There's some early retirements. The big one down there for a little over $5 million is just various projects in the engineering department that weren't really approved in the carryover process, but they were just due to the timing of the project. We need to pull some of those expenditures into this year's budget. So I don't know if you'd have any specific questions on any one in particular, but like I said, we just tried to identify those expenditures that we need to increase the current year budget for, so we're not in non-compliance with basically the state code.
The one that really sticks out, Wes, is the engineering, the construction projects. What is that underbid on some things, or what?
No, this is something we do every year. I don't know that it's that visible sometimes, but obviously you've seen it this time. What happens is we have projects that go over more than 1 year, more than one fiscal year. We don't know whether that amount is going to fall in this fiscal year or the next fiscal year, depending on when it was when it was constructed. So we try to balance those over several budget years, but we always miss. And even though we're having to amend this budget, we'll amend next budget, and those amounts that are too big this year will be too small next year. So,
yeah. Well, the way you were saying before, the software allowed that to go across the year, and now you have to be specific on.
Well, if we went over a budget line item in our old software, it would not flag that specifically. It would allow us to go ahead and make that payment, and then we'd have to go through and do a review normally in the spring to see where we're over and what we need to amend. But now, as we try to make that payment, if it's not budgeted to that level, we get the warning and a flag that says, no, we have to do a manual override before we can even make the next progress payment. So this is really trying to get away from manually doing an awful lot of those in the course of all our expenditures for the city.
Just so I understand then, okay, so to just take, for example, that engineering line item. Those were dollars that were previously budgeted maybe in a prior year and just weren't spent then, and then we have to put them into this year's budget? Or
since we're budgeting 16 to 18 months prior to a project probably even being let,
right,
and that end of the budget falling on June 30th in the middle of the project, okay. 16 months earlier, I'm trying to guess that we're going to spend, if it's $1 million project, that we're going to spend $400,000 of that in this fiscal budget and $600,000 in the next fiscal budget, okay. Even though it hasn't gone up. Well, we may get to the end of this budget and I've spent $600,000 this year and $400,000 next year.
Okay.
We have to adjust this year's budget to go from 4,000 or 5,000 to 6,000.
Right.
The budget hasn't gotten any bigger.
So there are items that have been approved. The
Yes.
spending has been approved.
Yes.
Okay. I mean, I'm just trying to get it clear for everybody, or for myself. The spending's been approved. We've already approved the spending, the $5 million at some point.
Yes.
We just didn't predict correctly which year it was going to fall in.
Yes.
It needs to be moved into this year now.
Yeah, just because of the way it falls, those dollars.
It's not additional spending.
Right.
This is
Right.
spending that has been already approved and agreed on. It just didn't get in the right fiscal year or the correct budget.
Yeah, we're estimating that 18 months in
By-
advance, so.
because of the inability to accurately estimate. And then now we're having to put it into the budget so it can be actually spent.
Right.
Okay.
Yep.
I think that makes sense.
I hope so.
Right. That isn't to say that we're $11,198,000 over budget. It's items that have been budgeted that haven't been spent.
They've been approved and they're allocated, but we're just trying to get them into the correct budget year when they're actually being spent.
Yeah, we might have $1 million asphalt overlay program that is in, I estimated 18 months previous that it was going to fall into 15, 16 because we were going to do it in the spring of 16. But the contractor says, no, we're going to come in after July 1st of 16, so then all of a sudden it falls into 16, 17 $1 million right there.
And the same applies for all the other items?
Pretty much.
It's the same concept?
I mean, like I said, there were some employee cash outs and things that really weren't budgeted per se. But I mean, as somebody retires and they have paid leave, we just have to go ahead and make that payment when they do retire. So there's a couple of those in there too.
Okay.
Or what about like the vet clinic that was budgeted with the central corridor? Tom, are you listening? But, so, I mean, what about like that? Was that not budgeted for this year? Is it just a lump sum in the?
Yeah, I think.
Explain like that.
Yeah.
The central corridor is kind of an unusual situation in the fact that we just budget lump dollars every year, lump sum dollars, and because there's so many different things going on there that particular purchase was probably not budgeted, but the expenditure for the central corridor in a couple $1 million or whatever was budgeted. Does that make sense?
Yes, that makes sense.
That's also one of the changes that the new software makes, is a lot of those things now are tracked as individual purchases, whereas before you could have just attributed everything to that other line item. It does bring some clarity to it when you run the reports on it, and you can see what's hitting individual line items, but it also means that we need to have some more detail so that we have an expenditure to approve against when we do the budget amendments. I think ultimately what it'll probably mean is that rather than being on a once-a-year budget amendment schedule, we probably will be looking at doing one around this time and then another one in the spring every year and doing them twice a year instead.
So, like some of these things say above budgeted amount. Is that, are those items actually the only things that are above budgeted amount? Everything else has been budgeted for somewhere? That makes sense.
One in particular you're looking
like
at?
Like hotel motel grants above budget amount, or there's a computer purchase over a budgeted amount.
Yeah, I think an amount was budgeted for both of those, but then when they made the hotel motel awards, I think they ended up awarding a little bit more than they had initially planned, or it was in the budget.
Right, and so are those the only ones that are actually above the budgeted amount because it says that? Or?
I believe so.
Well, that's in the software. Would you be able to put a line item for the next year into it that would allow it to tell it to transfer that money so it wouldn't show up like this, or?
I think we have to manually go in and make these adjustments.
Oh,
I don't think
okay.
it'll just automatically carry over, but I'm not an expert on how the budget or how the software works.
Yeah, like Dan was saying, if he saw that it missed his budget for, say, last year, that it would put it into an account that would not show it as an overage for the next year.
Well, we would, because council does adopt the budget in March of every year. Mm-hmm. So even if the software would allow that carryover, we would still have to bring you a budget amendment to have you actually authorize us to exceed the budget that was approved last March.
Okay.
We did talk about some options internally for that, but it really came down to, with the way the software works, the only way you could really do it is like for Dan's projects, you would also almost have to budget the entire amount in 2 fiscal years. And then when the public looks at that, all of a sudden, if he's got $2 million for a road project, it looks like you're spending $4 million on that road project. And we thought that would be a lot more misleading than just trying to walk through the amendment process instead.
Oh, okay, yeah. As far as the audit then, will that be okay with the audit people? I mean, if it's done like this?
Yeah, we're required by state law, and then, that's something the auditors check to make sure that we amend the budget before we spend the money.
Okay. So we won't get in hot water with them.
Should be okay.
It'd come out of Dan's salary, right?
Wouldn't go very far.
What happens, and I'll pick on Dan because everybody is, if at the end of 2016, if Dan hasn't spent this $5,030,000, how does that affect the 17 to 18 budget then, or 16 to 17? Do we show a credit, or how do we handle that one?
Well, one of the things that we'll have when we finish up the capital improvement plan that we've been working on, and Council's been briefed on that several times over the last year, is that we'll be able to track how much whatever the fund balance is in those individual funds, and know if we have projects or have funding that can be rededicated towards other projects. So we'll be able to track that a lot more accurately than we have been in the past. Normally, with something like that, the council will see what the final invoices are and what the final cost was for any specific project, so it would end during that year. Then you get into the capital projects budget, which is approved as part of the annual budget process, and see what projects are in line for the following fiscal year.
But we could end up with a credit on an account at the end of the year is what I'm asking.
Right, yeah. You could have an account if for some reason there's a change order that reduces costs, or a project is bid and it comes in at less than you anticipate, you'd show that you'd have an ending balance in that particular fund.
But as we approve this then, we're approving this amendment to this year's budget, then how long do we handle that if it's carried over as a credit in next year's budget?
Yeah, you'll see that when the budget process, you have the ending fund balances for all the various funds that you can look at, and you'll know how much cash is actually on hand in any one of those given funds.
Okay, thank you.
And then the next one is that top one, the resolution 25412. What was that? It's for the 2.7 million.
Yeah, that was a resolution we passed at the end of June, just to have, we had requested all the departments to submit to us all the different carryovers from all the different departments, and we lumped it into really one resolution. So that was a combination of different purchases for different equipment, things that were budgeted in that year, but the money just was not spent. So we got authorization from you to carry those dollars over into this year, but yet they weren't programmed into the budget this year, so we have to include that in our budget amendment.
And that's not one item, it's a lot of different things.
No, it was a whole page full of stuff.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, a lot of the things that you'll see showing up in things like that would be as if a department has scheduled to replace, I'll pick on PD and say they're scheduled to replace radios. Well, sometimes the vendor will say, you know what, if you wait until August, you can do a bigger order and you'll get better pricing, or a new model is coming out. So rather than spending the money by June 30th, we'll carry it forward, do a larger order to try to take advantage of volume pricing, or, like I said, wait for that next model to come out rather than doing it then. The other thing that will happen is because we have a fairly regimented equipment replacement schedule, the departments do typically budget for a replacement in the year that the replacement schedule calls for it, but we'll also do an evaluation of that piece of equipment to see if it's still working fine, and if it's still got service life left, we won't replace it. A good example might be cars in the building inspection department. If they're on a 9-year cycle for replacement, when we get to year 9, we would budget for it just in case we need to do the replacement, but we may not do it based on the condition and the how well the vehicles are operating, but we'd carry that forward into the next year, because that might be something that in in January of 2016, they might be fine, but in January of 2017, if we lose 3 transmissions, then it's time to look at doing a replacement. But that would show up on a carryover report as well.
Okay. Other questions on that?
Yes, sir.
Danny, do you have one more item?
Yeah, Your Honor, item number 5 under engineering is not really highlighted for conversation, but it was added late yesterday to allow us to move forward. The resolution authorizes condemnation proceedings for property needed for the Armour Drive project. I think everybody's kind of familiar with that. We have, over the last couple years, been working to come up with a purchase agreement with the Roushes. Have very limited, if any, ability at this point to do that. We've been working with Robert Goodwin, the attorney, to make sure that we do due diligence with the family as far as informing them. We have done our own resolution, or our own appraisal that was done in 2014, excuse me. $86,500 was the taking value that was set at that time. The Roushes did their own appraisal in 2016, which was $278,450. I can get those numbers to you if you're interested in writing or whatever. We're looking at about 3/4 of an acre in temporary easement and 0.63 acres for right-of-way. Because of the distance between the two and the lack of negotiation going on, we're recommending that we go forward with condemnation.
Distance meaning the difference between the two appraisals?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Lon's talked to them a lot about different ways to finance the project, how to help them as far as our normal way of doing hookup fees or whatever to help with the development of the property. None of that has really caught traction with the owners, so we'd like to move forward.
So you're looking for council approval to move forward with condemnation of the
Yes,
property?
the attorney says the next action is to authorize this resolution moving forward.
Okay. Does everybody understand that? Okay. Any
Thank
questions? No questions?
Nope.
Planning? Oh, sorry.
One thing I want to mention, Ryan, this letter from the Taylors is in the engineering section. I appreciate you answering that about the roundabout marking. That was actually in the engineering section, I see, but you had answered a question for me from the Taylors.
Yeah, we're looking at evaluating, you're talking about the roundabout?
Yeah.
Yeah, we're looking at evaluating that and come up with a good system there for all of our roundabouts.
Right, but you had sent me an email answering that question. So.
Yeah, we're going to discuss it, see if we can come up with a standard marking for it.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
Yep.
Thank you, Mayor.
Okay. Planning.
Good afternoon. The first item on the agenda under planning for discussion will be there's a public hearing on Thursday related to the vacation and sale of the property uptown. For the alley bordered by 8th and 9th Street south of 6th Ave, Block 26. This is Perry Development. I think the council is pretty familiar with the project area that's been discussed, and understanding that with the development of that project, if you recall during the rezoning, anything that happens on the property is coming back through the Planning Commission and zoning and council for review and approval. They're going to be proposing a project on the north side of this block, 9th Street, 8th Street, 6th Ave. So there's a larger brick house on the corner here, an apartment on the other corner, and then a smaller house that sits kind of up front on 6th Avenue in this vicinity. Their project is proposing to incorporate some of these houses into the redevelopment, and to do so they needed to have this property the alleyway there vacated, and then ultimately requesting it be sold to them. This is the current state of the alley. I would note that it's a pretty rough alley. There is access through here currently. However, there's also access on the south side of the block for those that would wish to use that alley. She owns all these properties here, so clearly she knows she's going to have limited access in the future for the property on the north side. We've not heard any conversations from folks in the neighborhood that there's an issue with this, and they've all been notified of the proceeding. And on Thursday, there may be people here to talk about it, but at this point, I don't really have anybody that's called with any real pressing issues related to the vacation and sale. I would point out that we do have a process to calculate. It's basically a city policy on how we calculate the value of alley vacations and sales. And what we generally do is the 35% of the average assessed value of the adjacent properties is generally how we do that. And with that being said, the value of this alleyway turns out to be about $1,100. So that's
Why is that? Why is it 35% of the adjacent property?
well, I never like to give this answer, but the answer is because that's the way we've always done it. Now, I don't know that there's many other communities. I haven't looked into it recently.
Presumably, when the person buys that alley and it gets combined with their property, it's going to be worth the same as their property.
Absolutely.
Per foot.
Yeah.
Or, you know.
So, I mean, it's something we can look into. It's been quite a while since we've done an alley vacation and sale. Many times, though, and I would say this many times, that it's a remnant piece of ground that the city is not maintaining and there's no roadway on it. So sometimes it's just as easy to provide the property to the landowner, let them attach it to their property, and pay taxes on it. It brings property back onto the tax rolls. There's very limited alleys in town currently, so that are usable, and a lot of them are just they're actually being used by the adjacent property owners currently. So I realize that's not the greatest answer. It's something we could look into if there's a desire by council and what other communities are doing, but that's really why we discounted a little bit. I will say that the value of the alley and the cost of it and the processing we don't even, the staff time to vacate and sell alleyways is not minor. It takes time, a lot of time. So, but nonetheless, when it's a development project, it certainly makes sense to do so. This project and this land will be redeveloped commercially, and so it'll have a much higher tax rate than it currently does now.
Can you put the picture back up, please? So that east-west alley, that's not vacated, correct? Or is it?
Correct. Yep.
So there's going to be that little stretch of alley to the east of there that's going to be inaccessible by anything or anyone.
In this area?
That's an alley.
Big. That's going to be a little island there, isn't it?
You know what? I'd have to let me check for sure on that. I believe that alley has been vacated. It's just not reflected in this map, but I would need to check with Dave to be sure. Let me check on that and get back with you on Thursday. But yeah, that would make sense. As I look at the illustration, it appears as though there's been some construction. This garage looks like it's constructed in that alleyway, as is a garage here, potentially. So.
Would that not just be to the back of that lot? Would it be across that east-west alley?
As proposed?
Yeah, I mean, that's what I'm asking, though.
Would.
Because people could come in the east-west and go down the south alley if we didn't close it off right there.
Mm-hmm.
Why wouldn't they be vacating it to the end of those lots?
So the north side
south side of those lots.
Yeah.
Instead of the north side of the alley.
Yeah, I let me look into that, but I don't know. Kesha's here. I don't know if she knows anything about it, but
it's probably been vacated because otherwise
I'm fairly certain that it has.
Yeah. Otherwise, that wouldn't make sense to go down that far. So.
I'll verify that, though.
Okay. Any other questions on that one?
So like I said, on Thursday's public hearing, and then there'll be the resolution approving the vacation and sale, consistent with that, if there's no objections to the council. The next item is also an alley vacation, but not a sale, and I think that's pretty important to understand on this one, because this is for the alleyway located behind Ramsey's on 7th Avenue. So this is the alleyway, and it goes to the center of the block and would extend the west side of the block. The property be maintained as it currently is. The idea is that, their request is based on the premise of providing outdoor seating for patrons in the spring, and they would come back through that for that process. And then really it would restrict vehicular access through the alleyway. As the council's aware, with Art in the Alley on the west block here, we ultimately would like to provide additional ingress and egress for all the businesses along 7th, because when 7th Avenue does ultimately get tore up, we'd like to help reestablish rear access during the time of the construction. So I think that's what they're trying to do. They're thinking ahead. There would be rear access to the property. They'd have outdoor seating. And we would also require that they maintain a access way within the alleyway to meet ADA standards for passersby. So if you were walking through the uptown, down the alley, you would still have the opportunity to walk down the alley. It's just really prohibiting the ability to drive. All of these tenants have been know what's coming with this proposal, and I don't think we've heard any negative responses. They've worked with the property owner down here, Studio 811, to provide for garbage pickup, so they'll be maintaining their containers here and then taking them down for pickup when that's appropriate. So that does require them to do a little travel with their garbage, but they're willing to do so in order to kind of invest in that back half of the alleyway. So, any questions on that?
Tom, I got a question. I'm just a little nervous and concerned about the relationship as far as the disposable of garbage. So if that relationship or that contract becomes null and void, what are the alternatives for them for their receptacles for trash? What's our plan B for that?
If that's not the case, then they have a commercial hauler. So they do have the opportunity currently to keep, like the one's a business that I don't think has wet or organic type debris. So theirs is, I believe, inside at this time.
Okay.
Ramsey's there's a little alcove, a cutout, where they put their trash. It's not even in the alleyway currently.
Okay.
No one's storing it in the alleyway currently.
Okay.
So that would require them just to walk it to the end of the block.
Okay, perfect.
So, yep, so it would not provide the opportunity for, and I can't be certain of this, but I think it would be pretty tough to provide that service in the alleyway that exists. I don't know, Dan, if you know if they do pick up in the alleyway. It's not a dumpster. That they're the larger containers, but not the dumpster style pickup.
Right, I think they're all portables is what I'm seeing now. So.
Yep.
Tom, originally, the Art in the Alley went that block as well as the other one.
Yeah.
What if in the future we were to get another grant and be able to do that alleyway? This vacancy doesn't affect our ability to do that at all, does it?
No, it just takes away the public public use of it primarily for vehicular traffic is what we're looking
Do people park behind the one building there currently?
I believe they can. Yep.
Is that going to eliminate, have we not heard from them?
Tom Franz owns both those buildings, and we've not heard anything that would suggest that they're in opposition to this. They actually own this parking lot as well.
Right. But there is parking.
Yeah, there's stalls in here, but they're not currently being used. So.
Until Thursday night.
Yeah. And in all honesty, I think the idea is that it's to remove it from through traffic. If someone's still parked there and they drove over, I don't know that it's a deal breaker for anyone. But the concept is that it would not provide that through traffic, east-west.
Well, if Art in the Alley ever developed in that alleyway, that'd be valuable two valuable pieces of land for the art
Absolutely.
alley, yeah.
Yep. Yeah. And obviously, it's not the intent to city to sell, from staff to sell this or provide that opportunity. It's simply to remove the.
It would just be by a permit that they could have seating there or something?
Yep, we would bring back a permit that we have for other seating areas in the spring, and it would provide that. They'd have to show the layout, how many tables and seatings, and then they'd be approved. Yep. Or it'd be brought to council for approval.
Would it also then have the seasonal railing
Yep.
installed? Okay.
Absolutely.
So do we have any other plans to barricade this alley off so that no vehicles, will the approach be modified, or will we have any way to keep cars out of this alley? We don't want cars obviously pulling up to people that are sitting in chairs, obviously. And as I'm looking at these photographs, all of these parking spots behind Sorg and so forth will be right up on this.
Yeah.
Right
next
up,
to it.
right there. So
Yeah.
how do we navigate that?
At this point, there's no proposal to put blockades unless someone else has thoughts on that.
There is a fairly substantial but low concrete wall between the Sorg lot and the alley on that side, so you can't come in from the Sorg lot and come automatically into the alley. There is the approach coming off of 11th Street where a car could conceivably come and turn in and come up there, and then you'd probably have that same condition coming in from the east side down behind the law office and the old
Right.
Irwin's building where someone could approach it that way. That could be done with either signage, bollards. There's a lot of different ways that could be accomplished.
Sure. Okay. I just want to make sure that gets addressed because I'm looking at the photographs as well too, and I don't like the fact of having chairs and people sitting there in an alley that could have a vehicle come down it either accidentally or on purpose. So.
Yep. No, that makes sense to look into the ways to stop the traffic.
Yeah, and ultimately, with the potential expansion of the Art in the Alleys project this direction, a lot of that access is being controlled on the other side by gateway features and things that are being installed as part of the art installations, and I would assume that something similar would happen over here.
Perfect.
Yeah, I was going to mention the ramps, the alley ramps on the other block are still there. In fact, we've put them back in again after the storm sewer went in, so it's being dealt with in other manners.
So what happens 5 years down the road if the Art in the Alley gets extended in there with this vacation?
If you think back, this is actually in prep for the Art in the Alley project. We vacated all of that area to vehicular traffic to get it prepped for pedestrian traffic. As long as it's considered to be part of the public right-of-way, people have the ability to use vehicles on it. It's still public property, but it's been vacated, so it can't be used as a street or an alleyway. We still own it. You just no longer have the right to drive vehicles down it.
But we would need to vacate it at that point. If you didn't do it now, you'd need to do it at the point that it's going to be incorporated into the Art in the Alleyways project. Is that what you're saying?
And then the agreement with Ramsey's for having the tables out there, is that a yearly? They have to renew that every year?
Yeah, that's the way it's been a newly adopted policy. I can't recall the details of it. I think we did it last spring, maybe even before that. But
It's an annual permit.
But it's an annual permit, and there's a process. It's basically an encroachment agreement, but we're doing it through a permit because it does impact access along our corridors. So, and it would require the ADA accessibility through the area and the fence, and then especially if there's going to be alcohol served, there's got to be a fenced-in area. So yeah, and insurance and all that fun stuff. Yep.
Thank you.
Could there be a canopy or something behind their building?
They could, but that would also require an encroachment agreement.
Right.
Yeah. Similar to on the front yard. If you extend over, you're generally required to get an encroachment. And there's provisions on how high they can be. And
you put propane heaters out there.
Oh, Joe.
Let it lay, Joe.
That was a shot at the chief.
Okay, other questions on this one? All right. 13?
there's a number, just for the council's awareness, there's a number of items related to the development of the property on Albernet Road, owned by the James Lewis Revocable Trust, James and Diane's property there. And it's been the scenic development, there's a residential development going in as well, and a plat. We got preliminary and final site development plans. We've talked about that a number of times, so I wasn't really going to present anything on it, information of the packet. And just so you're aware, the developer for Scenic is here if there are specific questions regarding that. So I've just let you know that he's here. If there's no other questions, I'll just go on to 13 now. Item number 13 is we always like to highlight these things. Kesha Billings in the planning department's been very active in the grant with the Lynn County Trails Association, and I think she's been twisting some arms and was able to work $50,000 out of them. She's been kind of working on that for some time, so this is going to help with the Grant Wheel Trail Extension project. As you know, we've been running in some overruns on that project, and we're still not fully aware of what that's going to be based on the letting coming out in the future. So this is going to help provide for the paving of that, and I think that's specifically what it's related to. Is then so currently there's some crushed limestone would be proposed within there, and this is to try to get that upgraded to an asphalt or a hard surfaced area. So
wasn't part of that going to be boardwalk? So is that considered paving?
I'm going to let Kesha handle this one, but yeah, there's a lot of moving pieces with this trail.
Right. They understand that there would be bridge over Squaw Creek and a boardwalk that would be hard surface, easily
So boardwalk
passable.
is hard surface.
Yeah.
To them.
Anything.
Okay.
It would be ADA requirements. It's just that there was one segment, if you piece it out, the paving cost. I went to the Lynn County Trails Association and said, you know, we have a funding shortfall. Potentially we could leave this segment of this trail project unpaved. Just kind of putting it in dollar figures of this is what we'd be missing out on. And that's why they specifically have the paving of the entire trail project.
Sure.
Minus the bridges.
Okay. Thank you.
Kesha's been relentless. I think if you look back, I think over the last few years, we're about $10 million in trail funding. So she's been really good to providing some dollars for the city's trails.
Thank you,
projects.
Kesha.
The next item is a discussion I'd like to have with the City Council. At the last meeting, you received a letter from some property owners in the area bound by between 5th and 6th Avenue and 14th and 15th Street. That white thing over there, Dan.
You need one, Tom? I got one in my office.
You have one? Yeah. As the council is aware from that conversation at the last meeting, there was questions from one of the property owners. They're kind of struggling with the fact that they want to sell their property, and there's currently, if you go up on 5th Avenue right now, there's a property for sale there owned by Ms. Dawson. And I don't know if she's in the odd. Good, okay. So her property is currently for sale. The city, some time ago, did approach the property owners and did appraisals on their property, primarily because of the area and the impacts, just to see what the value of those properties would be in a potential acquisition. They're not a part of the corridor project, so we don't need the properties to complete the roundabout at 15th and 6th Avenue. However, with two of them going to be for sale, and then it remained, under that scenario, there would also be one other property owner upon which we're buying a portion of their property. There's been some concerns as to why we don't just proceed with acquiring the property on the block. And one of the primary reasons, I think, is they're going to have a hard time in selling the property, realizing that the construction's coming next year. I've spoke to one of their realtors at great length, and they're trying to have they're having a difficult time explaining to potential buyers on what's going to be happening, how the project's going to affect the property, and what the end result is going to be in once the project's complete. So there are some struggles that they're having in selling their property. I'm going to bring up a picture here if I ever get it accomplished.
Does it come off?
There we go. So you can see the roundabout in this vicinity. This is 15th and 6th. The vet clinic that we've been working through, the acquisition is located here. Essentially, the black line is the back of curb. The red area is the right-of-way that will be established upon completion of the project, and the goldish area are the temporary construction easements we're going to need to complete the project. So we've acquired this property here. We'll acquire this north side and this south side here. You can see there's a larger parcel. Ms. Taylor is in the audience. She has this house here. We need the back half of her property for the project as well. So we've done an appraisal, and we'll be making an offer on that portion of the property soon. But you can see we're also going to be tearing into quite a bit of her backyard. The property on the corner of 15th and 5th, we purchased last year, the Poshby property, if you recall. Ms. Dawson's home is located directly adjacent to it right here. And you can see that we will be into her side yard pretty substantially with grading for the project. So we would need to go to her requesting a temporary construction easement. Her house is the one that's currently for sale. I think she would have a difficult time selling the property, realizing that we're going to be in there tearing up the yard next year probably. The other property owner is here on the corner, and she's Alicia Boker has approached us, and she's going to list her property, wants to sell her property, and thus is coming to the city and saying, listen, it's going to be very difficult, as other people have had on this block, to sell the property, and so they're wanting to know if the city would provide acquisition of the properties. I did pull the appraisals for the properties when they were completed. All three properties, if purchased at the appraised price, which is consistent with what we've been doing in the event we don't need the property for the public project. So you've seen us come to you for acquisitions that are within an area that we need to acquire the property for, and they want to do it now opposed to a year from now, and we've done 130% of the value. And just so there's no 6B process included in this, this would be an acquisition at the appraised value, which we've done.
How long ago did you do the appraisals?
May.
Of this year?
Yep.
And you did all three parcels?
Correct. Yep. We were just trying to get an idea of what the value would be to purchase the entire block.
And you said, so Taylor, you said was the name of the one?
Yep,
on the
Ms.
north?
Taylor. She and her daughter are in the audience this evening.
And they want to sell?
They're interested to hear what's.
Yes,
okay. Okay. So we had her property was 68,000. 1412, which is Alicia's, is 94, and then the Bauer property, which would be the closest to the roundabout, came in at 92. So those are the values of the properties, and like I said, what we've been doing in some of these is just providing the appraised value or the assessed value.
Can you say that again? 92, 94?
68.
68. I think it came to 254 was the total acquisition.
168.
I would also point out that within this area, and this is some of the things that we're running into as we acquire property, there's limited access that comes with some of the acquisitions and ultimately the purchase of property. If you notice, 13th Street will not be, access to 6th will not be provided. In the event that we would acquire the properties, you can see that we would have a substantial piece of property for redevelopment, including the right-of-way. It does lay out nicely. It would be right on the corner. And I think there's some value in having that property, potentially for redevelopment. So,
Are you talking about vacating 14th?
Correct. Yeah.
Now,
ultimately, we'll vacate the north side as well, most likely, for a redevelopment project on the block, because there will not be any access to 6th Avenue at 14th, either north or south. It's too close to the curve radius of the roundabout.
So just out of curiosity.
Yep.
If you vacate 14th on the south side of 6th, that's the access to the school's parking lot.
Correct.
So they would have to do a new access off of 5th?
Well, yeah, we would have to. There'd be a lot of workings through this. But yeah, that would ultimately.
Are the homes on 6th Avenue that are west of 14th, are they going to have driveway access on 5th or 6th? That makes sense.
One of them will. They have existing access, so they would be provided that. The large home in this vicinity, they have a garage access here.
Right.
I believe the others are access through the alleyway, which the alleyway would be maintained unless something else from redevelopment occurred.
Tom, is there any historical significance, those as railroad houses? If we ask our history.
I honestly have not done that. I do believe the two on 5th are railroad homes.
Mary Lou says it's a railroad house.
Yeah, I wish we'd ask our history group to review that.
Yeah. Even if we did acquire them, there's no. What we're proposing to do is hold off until we have a number of homes that we've purchased or properties, and then walk down the road of demolition and doing that. But certainly, the one on the corner, I believe, is fairly similar to the one that Ms. Dawson owns as well. So,
what would you propose we do then? We're release them back out for short-term leasing then, or what would we do with them?
You know, that would be at the council's discretion, and I think we'd have to come back with a real solid report on that. I'll be honest with you, I don't know that the city's the best landlord. Any of the properties that we do lease, we have to bring back under the tax rolls, so we pay taxes on them. We would have to do inspections to ensure that they do meet code requirements for rental. So there'd be a little bit of a process engaged in that. I would also just identify that we're hoping to be in that area constructing that in the spring. So it would be a pretty short-term lease. So, but that's kind of the plan, is to get the acquisitions made and move on to the next phase of this. Whether we come from the west at the 26th Street roundabout or we start at this vicinity and move east, it's.
I would agree. I hate seeing empty houses around town.
Yeah, and there's certainly a market.
They're just liabilities waiting for us to address later down the road. So whether they be leased back to the current owners for a given period of time or whatever, there's, like you said, there's a lot of options. So
yeah,
I was just curious. I know that was a premature question, but
no, that's a good question. We just acquired. There's 2 properties in the library block that we've are in the process of acquiring, and what do we do with them, and how do we?
Right.
Some of this is a learning curve. I don't think in the history of the city we've ever had a lot of properties, and leasing back I don't think has been a strong suit of ours. It's just we got other things we focus on.
Thank you.
So the timing is good now to acquire because we wouldn't have to pay relocation.
Absolutely, and we would not need at any point to do that for the properties that we're talking about now, just simply because they're not an absolute necessary for the project. So this would be a straight acquisition, just like any other private transaction, a sale. And we've got appraisals, so in my mind, I guess we would move forward and make recommendation and make purchase agreements based on the appraisal reports on the property. So if there's support from the council, we'd move forward. I think one of the things we'll need to do is verify budget availability on this and move in that direction if there's support. So.
Depending on the software working, right?
Yeah, well, yeah.
Have you had any inquiry about redevelopment there?
Not right offhand, but I will say that this is around both roundabouts and a lot of the property in the corridor that we're talking to developers. Right now, there's a big desire for property in the corridor. This block is going to be very prime for redevelopment. We have to acquire this entire block, and again, we'll have that. That's a substantial piece of property on the roundabout and a major arterial. I think it's prime for redevelopment. We've had people come in and want to build buildings or have uses in the corridor, so we kind of target the areas that we foresee that we will have ownership of, or that we know where there's properties that are available and probably could be acquired reasonably. This block is one of them. This block is another.
I was going to say,
yeah.
Has there anything been talked about the other side with acquisitions? And
we own this lot,
right,
and this lot,
right.
And we'll ultimately own, the right-of-way here and the Burgess property over here. And we've already started those conversations, and we've been meeting with Mr. Burgess. This is owned by Genesis Equity. This property is also an acquisition. We just met with them on Friday. And King's Material, we're meeting with them. We got an offer in. Also on the agenda is a conversation about the environmental site assessments that we need to have updated to proceed with acquisitions and offers. So we're very active in this area right now.
On those numbers you put out, was for the houses, the 94, I think it was 94, 96, was that the price that was, I can't think of the word now, that's the price of the house?
Appraisal.
That didn't include the 130%?
Correct. That's
Okay.
Straight appraisal.
That's the appraisal?
Yep.
Yeah, okay.
We only use that in the event that we know that in the long run we would be acquiring for an essential public purpose.
Right.
Yep.
Okay, thanks.
Yep, no problem.
Okay.
Does there seem to be support? And I'll check with the budget and bring back a motion or something for Thursday. Is that perfect? All right. Thank you. I know there's probably some excited folks in the audience regarding that. So. Oh, sorry. The next item I'd like to talk to the council a little bit about is the interim development ordinance. I'm going to talk in concept, and what I would like to do, just before I get into this, I'm just going to talk about it relative to the ordinance that I've got a draft of. I know you don't have a copy of this. I'd like to be able to provide a copy to the council on Thursday and to enable a set date for a public hearing to be added to the agenda, and then the hearing would be at the next city council meeting, realizing that you'll get a copy of the ordinance that night. If there are concerns and the hearing is scheduled for the next council meeting, that hearing can be continued, or even if it's closed, there's no need to adopt it immediately. So if there's issues with the ordinance, once you get a chance to review it, we can either table the public hearing or continue it or not adopt it at the time. So I'd like to just talk with you in concept of what we're referring to and be able to provide that to you via email, and then we can even talk about it briefly on Thursday during the set date if you like. But obviously, the interim development ordinance is really something we'd like to put in place over the central corridor, just to provide an opportunity for there to be an additional level of review for development projects that hit in the central business district and continue out to 31st Street. We've had 2 or 3 projects come to light, and I think there's been some concern from both council and staff on, is that what we want to see in the area? And the plans have gotten pretty far down the road before we've really seen a lot of the details, and they've caused some question as to how did we get this far without knowing X, Y, and Z. The interim development overlay district would cover, like I said, the central business district and basically between 5th and 8th Avenue down to 31st Street. And it would provide a requirement that any new project essentially provide elevations and site plans and renderings, color, which will help, for the council or for review by Planning Commission and City Council. That would be within the corridor. In the Uptown District, there would be an additional oversight, which would be the Main Street Board of Directors or their designee. They have a design committee that could provide that service as well for consistency with the Marion Uptown District guidelines. They have design guidelines up there, and they're currently guidelines. They're not adopted by the city code. They're merely a policy document. And I think having a project reviewed against that policy document would be a good thing to have. And that project, once it's reviewed, let's say the dentist office, use that as an example, they would bring their renderings and elevations to the Main Street Board. They would make a review recommendation to Planning and Zoning Commission. They would review it, and then it would come to the City Council as well for final approval and consideration. So they'd be fully vetted.
And council would have the ability to disapprove the project based on what the council would be able to disapprove the project.
Correct. And I think that, and the idea is...
For any reason.
Yes. The idea is that there would be an additional review proceeding regarding it to ensure that it's meeting the standards that you want to see. In the interim, the key to this is interim. We would want to do this for 6 months. Okay. As you'll recall, we had direction from the council to proceed with a contract with Stanley Consultants to do an update to our central business district and uptown plan. What I would bring forward is a contract for that service and a timeline, and then this interim ordinance would be in effect until we get that plan updated, and it would provide guidelines and regulations as we move forward from then. It'd be initial 6 months, and then after that, it would have to either be discontinued or renewed by the City Council, or hopefully we would have the standards in place for review within the ordinance adopted.
So if we pass this, then we will move efficiently to get a permanent ordinance in place.
Absolutely.
And what's the status on the East End design?
We've got some concepts and that we've developed. For a long time, we had the development interests were providing site plans and moving quickly and wanted to move forward. Honestly, we haven't seen a revised site plan for any of the property on the south side out there of 7th Avenue.
No, but we were working on design standards.
Correct. We've got some preliminary design review. I have not presented to the City Council at this point.
For our own requirements.
Yes, we were putting together some concepts for the area to see how we'd like to see them developed. Correct.
Okay, so that's where in the process? I mean, are we getting close to adopting something or presenting something or?
What we would like to do is have the concepts kind of put together, presented to the council, and then that would be what we would take a look at. If a project comes in, it may not meet those specifically, and we would have the other standards in place, so there would be the review process. Currently, there's no required review process. At the east end, if someone brought in a use that was permitted, there's no review by Planning and Zoning Commission. There's no review by the City Council. It is merely, it meets the zoning code. We have central corridor design standards, and then it's all internal. There's no public process, and it basically a permit has to be issued because it meets the standards. So this would put in place that additional level of review. So.
Questions?
So your design standard would eventually turn into an ordinance then?
Correct.
Is that what you're saying?
Yep. But we just want something in the interim to kind of regulate what's going on. Right. You know, a lot of communities will put this in place because let's say we bring forward design. We have design standards committee that's been working. We met a lot of the design standards some of them are controversial. So someone may go out, buy a piece of property, submit building plans and permits, in order to get their project approved prior to instituting the design standards. And we don't want our planning process to be undermined by someone buying a piece of property, developing a project that is inconsistent with the plans that we're maybe halfway through.
Yeah.
So this would provide the opportunity. If someone brought a project that really we didn't know if it would meet the standards upon which we were in review of, that decision could be tabled, it could be put on hold, it could be asked to be reviewed at such time the plans are in place. So
I guess I was thinking the other way. If we made the plan and then somebody went off of the plan, and then when it came to the ordinance, it was different.
Say that again, Joe.
In other words, we do the plan and people start building to a plan, but then when we get to the ordinance, then the ordinance is written slightly different.
Well, correct. But that's why we would have the interim guidelines in place to ensure that as we move forward, that a project meets those.
So we're working on we're working on design standards for the whole corridor, and this would, in the interim, until that gets adopted and put in place as the standards.
Mm-hmm.
But this would require all projects to come for review, regardless of what they are.
I'm just saying,
to make sure that
doing the plan is fine, but if the plan that he's talking about,
the corridor plan.
The corridor plan.
Yeah.
But if it gets changed as an ordinance, there's some changes in it, then we're going to perhaps leave some contractor high and dry on there.
No, I think the concept would be that we would develop the ordinance around the long-range plan. So
what I'm saying is,
I think I follow what you're saying. So you're saying like we would approve something, and then 6 months later this comes out, and it's different than what we approved.
Yeah.
You're saying that they'd be out of luck?
Not them, us. If the plan, if we see something in the plan that we don't like and change the ordinance, then somebody's off building something
that we already approved.
Yes,
and they may
approved
have to
in
change
the
it.
plan.
Right.
But it's
and I
better
think
to
the
risk
key to
that.
it is, in the interim, if we seen a project that was maybe moving in the direction that was contrary to the planning process, we would say, hey, let's table this decision.
Yes.
And let us get the plan in place. So honestly, this does provide the opportunity to hold up some development, but it also provides leeway to that if someone has a project that you're fairly confident is going to be in line with the plan document, it can move forward. So the last thing I think we want is a moratorium. Then you just hold everything. This provides an opportunity for projects to be reviewed in the interim, and then ultimately would be bringing forward new standards within the corridor.
Well, you know me, I'm the plan guy. I like to have plans.
I appreciate that.
But I don't want to leave somebody hanging.
Absolutely. No, that's.
And I think the need for this is obvious. I just want to be sure that if we adopt this, that we're going to move efficiently and quickly to complete the plan and the ordinance, whatever it is.
Yeah.
To complete that we make that a priority, and then that becomes something that we work diligently on until it's done, so that we're not just putting things off and then having to deal with.
Maybe we should adopt the interim the interim to only have an expiring timeline.
Well, it does. He said 6 months.
Yeah, I would propose that it would be enacted for 6 months. And honestly, it's a good time. We're coming into fall. If a project was coming forward, you would already probably see it if they wanted to put footings in the ground. So, it's
just that, we have a lot of interest developing in the corridor.
Absolutely.
We've worked hard for 10 years to see it redevelop, and we want it done, developed to its greatest potential. So I see the need for this, but we're also, owners and developers, whoever it is, they need certainty, and they need to know what's happening or what it's going to be. They can't just wait for us forever to adopt this plan, whatever it is. They need to know what it's going to be. I just want to see us make it a priority.
Yep, absolutely. One of the central focuses on this, just not to go into a great detail when you don't have anything to look at. But one of the central focuses is going to be to limit the uses in the corridor to commercial uses. Currently, on Fifth Avenue, there's warehouse and light industrial uses and wholesale uses. The outside storage and the contractor yards are included in there. The ordinance I'd bring forward would suggest that you can't have those uses anymore, which means you can't create new ones. So any property that's currently being used, it's like anywhere else. If you change the zoning, it's a legal non-conforming use. So if I have an automobile repair place and I got cars stored outside, creating a new one of those in the corridor may not be permitted, but that one that's there, it can continue to exist as it has for eternity or until it's redeveloped. So that that's a very important piece to this, because a lot of folks will get very excited when they see we're limiting some of those warehousing uses and contractor uses. But if they're there now, they can continue. And we're required by law to require that unless we do an amortization or something very drastic, which I'm not proposing that we proceed with. So I'll drop that to you guys, and then we'll have a brief time on Thursday to discuss if there's a desire. Does that make sense? Was that the last thing I'm supposed to talk about, or is there more? I lost my agenda.
20's not starred, but it's...
And probably to your pleasure, I'm going to allow Kesha a moment of time.
19 is starred.
19.
What's 19?
Oh, we already talked about it?
We just talked about
Oh, yeah. So I'm waiting for a contract to come through for environmental services related to the acquisition of the remaining property in the corridor. I've been bringing you contracts for individual pieces. Last year, or I should say about 2 years ago, when we did the 7th and 7th Avenue project, I came in and just asked for a contract to do the environmental site assessments for the project area. So we did 4 or 5 properties. What we're proposing is essentially that we do all the environmental site assessments for the orange area on the map that we're showing. Some of them we've done in the past, but they only have a shelf life of about 9 months, sometimes a year. So you have to go through and just provide documentation that you've done a little review of them as well. So, many of these were accomplished in the mid-2000s when we had the brownfield assessment grants. We spent quite a bit of money in this project area related to assessments and cleanup, and so we've got to proceed. It protects the city from future liability in the event we buy something and then we find a storage tank or something. So anyway, I'll have a contract to present on Thursday, but ultimately we're trying to get all of it done at one time so we can move forward this winter. Questions on that?
What's number 20?
Number 20?
Number 20. It says discussion regarding painting on-street bicycle accommodations. Oh,
Kesha's going to talk about
Kesha.
that.
It just wasn't starred, so I
Thank you,
wanted to
Tom.
make sure we...
Hopefully it should have been.
Tyler, it's bold.
You're talking
But
about
not starred.
Volkswagen and all. You're gonna bring up Volkswagen, his sign. Oh, no. Do that Thursday.
We are going to talk
Well,
about
tough to see some of the colors. What I have here,
talk about it.
what I have is the Marion Master Trails Plan. This is the map within the Master Trails Plan that makes recommendations.
Way to go.
Lost our audience.
It makes recommendations for anything from on-street painting of bike boulevards and charros, bike lanes, and it goes into large sidewalks, and it talks about green space trails, the ones that we've gotten federal funds for. Those are going to be considered green space as they're outside of the typical right-of-way most of the time. So what's come about is Tom mentioned I was relentless in trails development. I would say I'm also relentless with staff as well. I want to make sure that we've got engineering on board with design, public service on board with maintenance and painting, and we've got parks on board for maintenance as well. So talking with Ryan, it's kind of the hope that we'd be able to get some on-street painting in addition to what we did last year. Last year, if you recall, there was a little news blip about Geode and 3rd Street. We painted the first bike boulevard in Marion, I think the first bike boulevard in the metro area. That bike boulevards are meant to be in residential, typically lower traffic streets, lower speed streets. Charros you'll see on some a little bit higher traffic, but not necessarily anything near your 7th Avenues, your 35th Street or anything. Those usually a bike lane or some other accommodation. So talking with Ryan, he said, let's feel free to jump in if you ever want to. It was kind of like, let's make this happen. Let's work on these paintings. I'm here today to kind of refresh you on the discussions that have been had, and the hope going forward is to paint all of the bike boulevards and Charros shown on this map and actually do it within this calendar year. Correct? Potentially. That is depending on the amount of staff time available and temperatures. And so just a clarification, basically you should be able to go to this map within the Master Trails Plan. If you don't have a copy, it's on the city's website, and if you'd like a hard copy, feel free to let me know. I will get you one if you don't already have one. So bike boulevards would be Parkview Drive, it's off the sheet. Grand Avenue, 6th Street. So all of these bike boulevards in here would kind of funnel into Hannah Park. You've got some more South 22nd Street. 3rd Avenue is one of those that would provide a nice east-west connection for somebody wanting to bike on street. This gives them a little bit more confidence to do so. Northern part of town, it goes 25th Avenue, Windermere, and then it also comes down by St. Joe's School, and then that one's already in. And so that would be it basically for bike boulevards of how we try and extend that network. Other Charros, they're still on-street paintings. They're just on streets that see a little bit more traffic. And so that would be South 11th Street. That one's already marked as a bike route. It's actually just putting painting on the street to remind people that bikes have the right to be there. A little bit on 1st Avenue, and then also 15th Street. So right now 15th Street has bike lanes. That Charro just continues the bike ability, the bike friendliness up on that street. McGowan, clear through from 10th Street over to 44th and 29th Avenue. And then a little bit on West 8th Avenue would basically fulfill the city's vision for on-street painting for bike boulevards and Charros. And so, go ahead.
Oh, I was just curious how the experience has been with Geode.
I think favorable.
I had one couple that lives on there that thought it was going to be just very dangerous and terrible. But I mean, have we had any other comments,
I have not
observations?
I've not had any complaints on everyone. So I do a bike ride after every farmer's market, June, July, August, and then after Swamp Fox. And that's the route that we take, is to try and make people aware of the...
any safety issues or anything like that? Or?
No. Bikers are just reminded that when you're on the road, you follow the rules of the road, must stop at all stop signs, must yield appropriately, just like you were a typical vehicle. And so it is one of those things. They are, bike boulevards are deemed safer because they don't have the speeds, they don't have the traffic, but you might not necessarily want to send your 5-year-old out on a bike and say, hey, it's safe, just go for it. There's still any type of road cautions that you'd have riding on any street, but they are safer. So for a beginning bicyclist, intermediate bicyclist even, they'd be the ideal street to ride on and feel safe and comfortable.
Would that be like a bike lane like I see in...
No, it's a shared lane.
Yep, it's shared lane, so the bikes would ride in the travel lane. There's no separate lane off to the side.
So I think the biggest thing we compare that to is Cedar Rapids, which is getting a lot of flack. So this is not what that is that right? Where you have a separate painted lane, yeah. Because our issues are is we're just learning the roundabouts. Now we're going to learn these bike lanes. I get a lot of flack on these bike lanes, and I'm for them. I really like them, but it's change again, and I think I'm a little confused as to what it is that we're actually talking about. If it is truly a separate painted lane within the lane, or if it's truly the one that's going up geode, if that's what they would all look like. Because a lot of people I talk, they're like, we don't know what this means.
Welcome back, Councilwoman Pazur.
I am here.
I have a question.
Has anybody brought up anything about bike riders showing insurance or registering with licenses and all this, since they are using, we don't get gas tax from them? I mean, there's got to be some compensation for.
Correct. There is in older city ordinances a requirement for bike licensing within the city. You have to do it directly through the police chief. Former Police Chief Doherty was not necessarily wanting to reinstate that. That's something that I've been wanting to take to BPAC to either take off BPAC, the Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee, to either take off altogether or actually start recognizing it.
Because back in '75, we the auxiliary, Marion Police Auxiliary, on Saturday mornings registered bicycles, and it was very successful. And a lot of them got returned to their owners when they would leave them someplace or get stolen too.
So to go back to what bike lanes are. I think the ones downtown Cedar Rapids are getting a little bit of attention, are the ones that they're painting green. It is meant to be, it is meant to gain more attention. This is where the bikes go. It's just more than your standard painting. This would be your typical bike lane through lane, and then the cars go over on there. And then the bike lane goes through an intersection. Then you have the dash lines through the intersection. So those are your typical, these are some bike boxes, and then down here, these would be your typical bike lanes. There is a specific area of the road where cars are not and bikes are allowed. What we're talking about is more of Geode and 3rd Street. This is, you can see the cars parked on both sides. There's no lane per se. And then down here, this is a larger version. I mean, you can see the size of the cars. I'm talking with Ryan. We actually have this in the plan, and talking with Ryan last year, like, no, that's way too big. So you can see the size of the cars. This would take up a full size of the car. What the symbols are meant to be, or they're meant to be small enough that a car tire drives over them, and hopefully less wear on them. It's enough to be wide enough for a bicyclist to say this is where you're ideally supposed to ride on the road. So it's just in the travel lane, no additional markings on the road other than a bike symbol and a chevron. In bike boulevards, it has the BLVD, just to kind of reiterate that is a even lower classified street, safer street.
Thank you. That was I appreciate that. That clarifies that a lot for me. So it's just a form of identifying riders where they should be and alerting the drivers of vehicles to be aware that this is a designated area for these bicyclists to travel. Mm-hmm. Right? Okay, good. I just want to make sure because I'm learning too, and there's a lot of, I can't tell you how many people I get. They're just like, we hope Marion doesn't do this, So I'm glad to see that that's the direction that we're going, as opposed to, because there's too much confusion as to being in a lane, out of a lane, in a turn lane, out of a turn lane. This lane is turn only, and then obviously you're you're cutting off bicyclists. It's just chaos in a metropolitan area. So thanks for clarifying that. I appreciate that.
And it's not that we'll do away with bike lanes. 6th Avenue corridor that's planned is proposed to have bike lanes. Tower Terrace Road has bike lanes on a portion of it. On some of the higher traffic streets, either with 35-mile-an-hour speeds or higher traffic, you do want bicyclists separated from traffic. So those bike lanes do still serve their purpose. It's just on lower flow streets. They're not necessary, and a lot of times on lower flow streets they have a narrower cross section that you can't fit bike lanes, 2 travel lanes and a bike lane over here safely. It just doesn't work. So in this case, you just share the road.
Right, okay.
And Kim had a question?
So that is where you would like bikes to be, and right where the painted symbol is?
Ideally, yes. And so working with kind of a painting standard, working with Ryan, that if you go up Geode and 3rd Street, where there's parking alongside of the road, so in this instance, say you have a parked car right there, well, it doesn't make sense to put the symbol next to the curb or 4 foot off the curb, is because when cars are parked there, they're parked right over that, and if you get people too close, you have the instance of dooring where people open their doors and you're right into them. And so where there's a chance of property owners would be parking on the street, you want them pushed in, so that way you're consistently riding where those symbols are. When there's no parking on that street or on that side of the street, you can shove them closer to the curb because there's not the danger of somebody parking there or being inconsistent in your riding.
Okay.
To give the council some idea on what's involved here is that according to this plan, we will have approximately 390 legends that we'll have to mark every year. Okay, that's about what we have now. That's all the arrows, the onlys through town, and so every year we schedule twice a year to go out and mark those. All right, so if the council wants to go ahead and proceed with this, I'll need to know so we can schedule materials. We'll need paint. We'll need to schedule a time to when we can do this. Typically, we do a lot of the legend painting overnight. It's just much easier. We stay out of the way of traffic, and we avoid people driving through that. But just so the council is aware, we're going to double our legend marking load with this, which is fine. I just want the council to be aware of that. The purpose of this is to make sure the council wanted to proceed with this. If so, we do have some time yet this year to get some of these markings on the road.
Had a question about the actual paint. I know the regular paint that you put down is kind of slick when it's wet. Is there any kind of paint you can get?
So with these road markings, with our typical legend markings, what you see are glass beads that we put down. We're required to keep those reflective.
Yeah.
And those make it very slick. With these, we typically do not. We're looking at utilizing a different waterborne fast dry paint so we can get them done quicker. It's a heck of a workload to knock out in a year, but we think we can do it if we use different materials in this nature. Just want to make sure the council's okay with it.
So these won't reflect with headlights?
They will not reflect. It's not required to reflect.
Yeah.
I guess. If they were reflective, that would be a much higher cost.
Yeah, I was just thinking for the bikes, you're going to have a lot of these in the road, and
right.
if it's slippery, there'd be a big chance of having a problem. So, anyway.
I'd like to bring up something. I have a huge concern, and I know this is something that we're trying to forecast for obviously next year for maybe the markings. My office is on the corner of 8th Avenue and 6th Street, and there was another major car accident there again last night. I'm just concerned about, until this corridor is done in here, it doesn't make sense to be marking up 8th Avenue and all of those areas until all of this uptown stuff is done, just from a traffic flow. I'm concerned with radical driving and cars passing each other, making turns and stuff. There's a huge safety issue here that in the back of my mind keeps coming up on this uptown area. As far as in the perimeters, I'm good with that. There's a lot of just worried about this uptown area here, getting too much or bicycle traffic out there right now until we get some of that safety issue squared away. But I'm open for feedback to that, Kesha. What are your thoughts on that? I mean, a lot of road rage out there right now in Marion.
I would say, riding myself on 8th Avenue, there's a portion that has bike lanes that are narrower than a typical bike lane, but they are bike lanes nonetheless. I don't necessarily see an issue there because you do have kind of a designated area. Usually people still try and leave a little space around you. 8th Avenue, west of 10th Street, between 10th and Lyndale, that's as a proposed bike lane. So when that would get reconstructed to allow for that additional width with the bike lane, the travel lane, and the bike lane, then we'd put those in. Right now, that's not being proposed on that part of 8th Avenue.
Okay.
It would be South 11th. We do see traffic on that. That would be Charlotte's marked on that.
That area over there, I moved over there 3 years ago, is nothing like what it is today. I don't know if we've done traffic counts on 8th Avenue lately, but it's phenomenal. Phenomenal.
So, I mean, what you would see in the uptown is South 11th Street coming into the uptown, 15th Street coming into the uptown, and I think a bike boulevard going along 12th Street in there. The idea is to get you from uptown, and wind your way up by St. Joe's.
Sure.
The idea of these routes were to connect you with
Right.
city center, parks, and
Sure.
schools.
Right. No,
And
I
so
totally
those would be
get
the
it,
only
yeah.
ones that would come into the uptown area.
Okay.
Right now, I think all of uptown is marked as 20 miles an hour, so
Right.
you can actually do that on a bike.
Well, and exactly, and what I'm concerned about in my area is what's causing these accidents are two cars going opposite directions, making a left-hand turn, and cars bypassing the other cars to drive around them, and that's what's causing these accidents, which pushes them into these bike lanes. So it's just something in the back of my mind. So I don't want to continue on digressing off of this because I think it's a great proposal. I just wanted to kind of give you a little feedback,
You see any vehicles traveling in bike lanes, be sure to let the police department know. I'm sure that they'll be happy to.
Sure.
I think one thing to keep in mind, though, is, too, we can't keep bikes off of those streets now. So I think any marking that we can give to kind of give them some direction would only be a benefit.
Right. But I think, in my opinion, and when I see geode, I do see people, and again, this is a learning curve where people are respecting the routes of these routes, and they know they're holding up traffic. And like I said, these are observations during off hours, and a lot of it's just me witnessing a lot of people's habits in driving, and safety is a big concern for me right now in our deal with when we got so much construction and this road's closed, that road's closed, this lane's closed, there's just a lot going on right now, and I'm just a little worried about that. But overall, it's a great program, and we're talking about something that's probably leading into next year anyway. So I just wanted to, by then a lot of this is going to be settled down, hopefully. So.
Are there any streets that are prohibited to bicycles?
Major highways, Highway 13.
Yeah, okay.
380.
And 100?
I'm not sure on that one. County Home Road is not, so I don't know if Highway 100 would be or not.
Okay.
I think it's sometimes you use the bicyclist discretion. So sometimes you see some crazies out there, but I don't think the Saint of Heart would ride on Highway 100. But
okay, and
I don't know if that's strictly prohibited.
They're still prohibited from sidewalks uptown, correct?
Correct.
Held in there.
And that's again what we're trying to get is in lower speed streets to have people feel comfortable that they can ride in the street, that they don't have to be shoved off to the sidewalks.
I think the symbols will only help make awareness that bikes are on the streets. So, yeah, it's a good thing.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kesha.
I have a quick question, Kesha. What's the status on the side paths, or whatever we called them, on 151?
The trails?
Ivy to Walmart.
They were proposed to be funded by the CMPO, the Metropolitan Planning Organization, the Policy Board in July. That goes to the DOT. They should be approved here in October. And so that money is for 2021. So we can't touch that money until the fall of 2020. And so it is just kind of a...
So they won't be put in until...
No, unfortunately not. And there's also transit maybe those are 2020 funds, and then transit funding is 2021. So it's a number of years out. But the good news is, in the interim, we'll be able to work on the Grantwood Trail, the Seymour Trail, the Indian Creek Trail, and the bridges over Marion Boulevard and Indian Creek. So it's not for lack of trails projects going on, but that is a waiting project.
I just think that will make a nice improvement to the aesthetics of that. That stretch,
Every time
so.
I see somebody walking or biking
Yeah,
along there.
absolutely, and make it safer for sure.
Mhm.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks. On.
Yeah, the first item under administration is that resolution to approve a contract with DOT for a grant for the Marion Airport. A successful application was submitted for design for what's called runway 1735. That's the existing north-south runway. The Airport Advisory Committee has been working on the airport layout plan now for quite a while, and has at their last meeting adopted a recommendation that runway be improved to 75 feet wide with concrete, removing the undulations at the end. For those of you that have been out there and walked it, at the south end, there's quite a series of slopes and downslopes down there that would be taken out. Would be rebuilt in concrete initially to 3,775 feet, with the ultimate goal of reaching 4,250 feet. The 3,775 is what can be achieved within the existing footprint of the property that the city owns north to south. To extend it out past 4,000 square feet, it would either have to go over the trail or it would have to go over the existing airport road. But I think there was a sense with the Airport Advisory Board that making improvements to our existing runway is going to be the quickest path to helping improve the business prospects out at the airport. So this will get us down the road towards the design, so we actually have construction drawings for it. Then I think the next logical step would be next spring to be looking at applying for construction dollars to go towards reconstruction of the runway.
Well, my understanding was that the figure 65,
63.
63 was 85% of the grant, and then Luxair picks up the other 15%, right?
Luxair will pay the 15% match on this, correct?
Okay. See, I did know that.
Number 2, this is a resolution setting a public hearing for a lot down on what's called Lot 3 in the Industrial Center East 11th Edition. This is a lot that the city owns. That's a piece of the fiber right property that we acquired back when that project didn't move forward. It's a 2-acre parcel that Mr. Anderson would like to purchase. The purchase agreement specifies that he has 3 years to do a project on that property. If not, then the city has the option to reacquire it back at the same purchase price. So he's been working with an interested company down there to do a build-to-suit for them on that property, and would like to lock it up to be able to proceed. The price on that is $50,000 per acre.
So how does that work? It's not an automatic reversion back to the city. We would have to go through and.
The way it's being structured, the city attorney actually is having the deed and everything prepared that would revert it back to the city to be held in escrow, but it would require action by the council to do that. The reason it's being set up that way is it's got a 3-year timeline in it, but if we say this project follows through and we hit 2 years and 7 months and he's got a project under construction at that point, we wouldn't want to exercise that option to bring the property back. So that way we've got a little bit of flexibility in there, but it does take action by the council to reacquire it. It's just he's already previously agreed to that. The purchase price is set, and at the 3-year point we have the option to do that.
So the purchase price would be the same as what we're selling it for?
Is this land currently up for sale, or was this some kind of deal that was negotiated with him previous, or I don't quite understand the tracking on this.
We've been marketing all of the property down there that we have. This one is a little bit different because Mr. Anderson was outside of the marketing agreement with Skogman because he was dealing with a piece of the property on 44th Street. If you recall, He was looking at 4 acres on 44th Street. We got in the middle of that when we acquired it for public service, and then worked with him to find a landing site for him to do his own business. One of the things he ran into at his other location is he got landlocked. He didn't want that to happen again. This is just simply buying the next 2 acres immediately west of his current building.
Okay. So he's buying it because he doesn't want to be landlocked?
He's buying it because he's got a project. That was always a possibility, is that there's a complementary project that he would be able to build on. Well, that could be something that he owns and leases to someone else, or it could be a build-to-suit.
Okay. But he's definitely going to build something on it. It's not just
There's
gonna
a 3-year window that would require a project to be completed or at least underway, or we have the option to reacquire the property.
I mean, does he have a project or doesn't he?
I have talked with the business that he has been talking with, because they called me to make sure that the property was actually something that was going to be viable for him. So I think it's a legitimate project.
But it's going to take 3 years?
No, it won't. But I wanted to make sure that if for some reason this one doesn't move forward, there was an opportunity for another project to take a look at that site. That was just, in talking with him, that seemed to be a reasonable time period.
Other questions on this one?
That close to what we paid for this property, or?
It's right in line with that. It's less than we're marketing some of the other parcels for, but part of the reason for that is because he was exempted from the listing agreement with Skogman's, we're not paying for realtor's fees on top of it, and the property that fronts onto 44th Street is higher value to begin with. It's a larger parcel and has better traffic counts over there.
Okay. Thanks.
Okay. Any other, that was it for you, for administration?
Just did want to let the city council know that I've received several phone calls regarding some of the signs that you've seen around relating to the ward voting issue. We're looking into that with our trademark attorney, and we'll brief the council as anything may move forward with that.
Okay. Questions?
Yes, sir.
All right. So we need a motion to adjourn to closed session.
So moved. Second?
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to adjourn to closed session regarding personnel matters.
Do we have a reading?
Do you have an opinion of our council?
Before you vote, let me give you my opinion. I reviewed the subject matter. It's appropriate under state law. And the city manager has consented as required by statute.
Okay, thank you.
He has to consent.
Okay, all those in favor of adjourning to close?
Roll call.
Have to have a roll call.
Oh, I'm sorry. I never remember that. So.
Ms. Pazur?
Yes.
Ms. Cecil? Yes. Mr. Spinks?
Yes.
Mayor Abou-Osley?
Yes.
Mr. Brandt?
Yes.
Mr. Sternad?
Yes.
Mr. Draper?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, we're adjourned to closed session.